I think it's pretty cool that YouTubers being able to jump into the filmmaking space has become such like a social norm now. A few years ago, a lot of people probably would have laughed at the idea of that. But now, over most recent years, we've seen creators prove themselves and show that they belong within the industry. On one hand, you've got Raka Raka giving us Talk to Me and Bring Her Back. Then we have Curry Barker, who gave us Obsession, one of the best films of this year. And now we have Kane Parsons. The 20-year-old former YouTuber has finally released his new film, The Backrooms. Now, I'll be completely honest, I was never really invested in the Backrooms lore. Yes, I was aware that there was a series on YouTube and people were always talking about it. There's like a massive Reddit thread, and we've all seen bits and pieces online. But I wasn't someone who was completely invested within this world. Ironically, that's one of the things I loved the most about this film. I knew nothing going into it, or barely anything, and I came out learning so much more. But at the same time, I still had questions by the end of it, and I wanted to learn more about the universe. The film follows Clark. Clark is a furniture store owner, and he's going through a pretty rough time within his personal life. His wife has left him, he's been kicked out of his own home, and now he's finding himself living out of his workspace. One night he was trying to get some sleep and he actually stumbled across a gateway in his basement. Although anyone can kind of stumble across a doorway, phasing through a wall, however, is a completely different kettle of fish. From there, a large portion of the film is spent with Clark investigating the backrooms, trying to map them out and learn more about them and what their purpose might be. One thing I think this film does incredibly well is its themes. It explores loneliness, isolation, losing yourself and your identity, and above all else, the fear of the unknown. Because the film is set in the 90s, the visuals... Wait. Okay. Okay. Because the film is set in the 90s, the visual style complements that perfectly. The grainy look with the found footage sequences really complement the atmosphere within this film and really create some sort of authenticity. I've seen a lot of people saying that found footage is quite an overused trope within the industry now, but honestly, I think after watching this film, this is one of the better examples of how to use it. Jesus fucking Christ, Squid. It makes those seemingly endless corridors feel so much more believable, and more importantly, so much more unsettling. And the camera movement definitely deserves a mention because it never seems overly cinematic. It behaves exactly how you expect for an ordinary person to be holding the camera. And I think that realism goes a long way in what they're trying to sell. I think the sound design is another huge strength. Everyone always talks about that constant fluorescent light hum always lingering in the background. It keeps the environment from feeling completely silent, while also creating this constant fear and sense of unease. On the other hand, the film knows exactly when to make the film completely silent. Silence is used incredibly strategically through this film, and especially just before some genuinely terrifying moments. For the first half of the film, mystery is absolutely everything. It's about learning who Clark is, learning about his struggles, and slowly piecing together the mystery of the backrooms. I think that's where the film is at its strongest because it lets you as the audience put pieces together. And I think that's very much appreciated instead of having everything explained for you. Unfortunately, during one of the major scenes in the final act, a lot of the story gets explained. Now, I actually think the explanation overall is really cool. I think it's clever. I think it makes sense as well. And it's one of those moments where it has you like, oh, yeah, makes sense. My issue isn't really with the reveal, it's more of the writing within that scene, and I've seen a lot of people talk about it because it's kind of corny. Some of the lines don't really hit as hard as I think they want them to hit, and let me be clear, I don't think this is down to the actors. I really don't. Everybody's performance within this film is unbelievable. It is a spectacle to watch, especially Clark, which I forget his actor's name, so I apologize. But I genuinely think the performances across the board were extremely strong. I just unfortunately think there's a couple of moments within the script that really let them down. As for the horror itself, Kane Parsons does an incredible job and has an insane understanding of how to build tension. He doesn't rely on constant jump scares. He manages to create dread through constant anticipation, which I find always far more effective. This is a very psychological horror film. There were multiple scenes within this film where I was desperately trying to remember every turn that Clark was making through the backrooms, so he kind of had an idea of where he was going when he was on his way back. And I found myself constantly mentally mapping this place. And that to me is great filmmaking. The film makes you fear becoming lost just as much as it makes you fear what's lurking around the next corner. Now, there were definitely moments within the film where I was wondering to myself, is the slow pace working? And for the most part, I think it absolutely does. I think the atmosphere and the world building are really fascinating. And I think those are some of the film's biggest strengths. But there are occasions where I think some scenes are going on a little too long and they definitely could be tightened up a little bit. I also do have one thing I want to mention about the final act, and unfortunately it does delve into spoiler territory. So if you haven't seen the film yet, this is your warning to get lost, scram. Okay, you gone? Cool. So during the final act, there is a part where we finally get a closer look at what these creatures look like. Personally, I'm never a huge fan of this decision. I think the mystery is what makes these creatures so terrifying. You don't know how big these creatures are. You don't know how fast they can move. You don't know how well mapped out this place is. And they might cut you off around the next corner. Your imagination has the ability to fill in those gaps, and I always find that far more scarier than seeing the creature itself. And this film is a perfect example of this. Once the film starts showing these creatures, a lot of the fear just kind of disappears. And if I'm honest, I think the creatures look kind of goofy. Now, I want to preface that there is a very good reason that they do look this way, and if you have seen the film, you know exactly why they look this way. And again, explaining that is going into major spoiler territory, which I don't want to talk about. I think I've got one more criticism with the film, and that is simply just its runtime. I think this film goes on a little bit too long, like 10-15 minutes too long. I think the runtime sits at around like 1 hour 50, and for a slow burn psychological horror, I think it's just far too long. But despite those criticisms, I genuinely think Kane Parsons has done something so incredibly impressive, especially at the age he's at, being 20. It's genuinely an unbelievable achievement, and he should be so proud of himself. And if this is what he's capable of on his debut film, I cannot wait to see what he is able to cook up next. So that was my review on the Backrooms. If you really enjoyed the video, then please leave a like, subscribe. If you have seen the film, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. It's genuinely an interesting film. I think I gave it an 8 out of 10. Like I've said it in these previous videos, we have had constant bangers in the horror genre this year, and it just makes me wonder, when's that gonna stop? Because I really hope it doesn't. They are so good. But yeah, thank you for watching. I really appreciate you sticking around to the end, and yeah, see ya.